The bare bones of faith in a lost land. You can still find it in the dusty streets and on the wooden benches of South Sudan's worn churches. There is little else to cling on to for so many here. But how long is long enough before you allow yourself to lose faith? As your country dips below the surface and the world turns away? How long before you admit that your dreams of nationhood were in fact stillborn? Dr. Deng Hall does the rounds at the state hospital in a wheel. His patients include a woman with malaria, her stare already a long way away. The hospital serves people from 3 states, but there aren't enough drugs for the sick, and there's no technology. The government in Juba, the capital, fighting a civil war, not poverty and disease.
How can you call yourself you are a referral hospital and you don't have oxygen machine? How can you call yourself you are a referral hospital and you don't have chemistry analyzer?
Paul is one of hundreds of thousands of South Sudanese refugees who returned to the country with great optimism after it finally broke from Sudan to the north in 2011. Back then, he says, his salary in South Sudanese pounds was worth $700 per month. Today, after years of conflict-driven inflation, it's worth $50, if he's paid at all. And yet still, he comes.
Because I love this country, these are my people, I cannot run away from them. Even if I don't have salary, I have to come. Our people fought for 21 years. At that time, there was no salary.
Wealth in South Sudan is today still commonly measured in terms of cattle in vast parts of the countryside. But the human cost of the war with Sudan is overwhelming. 1.5 million South Sudanese died fighting for independence over 2 decades. A struggle to break from years of perceived discrimination by Khartoum and its mainly Muslim rulers. The vestiges of that time still visible in this part of the country. Fighting ended in 2005 with the promise of a referendum down the road. And when it came, there were great celebrations as people returned to their homeland. But the euphoria was short-lived. Having finally won its independence from Sudan in 2011, South Sudan wasn't even 3 years old before it fell into civil war itself. Peace deals propped up and falling apart ever since. Now, war is spreading hunger and bitter disappointment. The Right Reverend Joseph Mannett preaches about the war to his congregation in a wheel regularly, the slide of his people into an ever more vulnerable state.
We didn't expect that we would go back to conflict.
Mannett is a member of the Dinka tribe, like South Sudan's president Salva Kiir. Kiir's former vice president, the rebel leader Riek Machar, is a Nuer. They're the 2 biggest tribes. Both men were soldiers in the war against Sudan. Now, their rivalry for power is blamed for fueling ethnic tensions.
Because of current conflict, you can easily be identified as from this category or section, and then you find yourself in problem, you know. And it will happen also to other people, not only me.
Even Sunday school-aged children get wrapped up in ethnic or tribal labels. The young dipped in old grievances.
The only thing that can help us as a nation is to forgive one another and to live peacefully and to coexist together. If not, then the other thing, like what happened in Rwanda, can also happen.
They have killed 2 like this man. Yeah, they have killed them. So come and see the, the sniper. where the sniper be.
Ateniwek Ateni is a big man with a big job. He's the spokesman for President Kiir.
These are the scars of the machine guns.
And he's showing us the battle scars left behind after the latest version of a peace pact collapsed last summer.
Treat this situation.
Ateni says Riek Machar's rebels opened fire on the state house, that they're the ones responsible for the ongoing war.
We are not buying weapons.
No?
It is the rebels that are getting weapons from those who wanted our country to continue to be destabilized. So the rebels are attacking our positions, and we have a self-defense.
Critics accuse the government of disguising ethnic cleansing as orthodox fighting, and UN observers blame the president's soldiers for a majority of the atrocities committed in South Sudan. Nearly 200,000 displaced people live under the shelter of UN peacekeepers in what are known as protection of civilians sites. There's even one on the outskirts of Juba. People are still too frightened of revenge attacks on rival groups to return to their homes. But Ateni insists Kiir is the only thing standing between South Sudan and full-on genocide.
Make no mistake, when you bring this government down, you will face all things that will happen. South Sudan will be more uncontrollable than even Somalia. The world did not know this, but they will soon realize.
Outside the presidential walls, the gratitude of the people is not evident. Civil society struggling to raise its head in an oppressive environment. A handful of young artists and musicians run a group called Anataban, which means I'm tired.
My people need some peace.
Not to mention disappointed, says Baraka Ayuru, who returned from the United States.
This is not what I voted for. I voted for a peaceful nation, I voted for independence, I voted for my children to have a better place.
Kenye Lado also spent time as a refugee, but in neighboring Uganda.
We don't see the vision. This was not what we really wanted. Yeah, we wanted us to be free and grow our nation.
But nation building is difficult at the best of times. In the midst of a crisis, it's nigh impossible. Especially when the building blocks were never fully formed to begin with, allowed to crack and splinter. There was no sustained effort to promote a collective identity once a common enemy in Sudan had been defeated. The civil war has now led to famine in 2 parts of the country, and nearly half the population is deemed food insecure by UN agencies. 5 million people, breadbasket states no longer producing food. An army of aid agencies led by the World Food Programme is trying to feed those cut off by fighting or hard distances, relying on airdrops in worst affected areas. But the humanitarian crisis will not resolve unless the conflict does. So says Serge Tissot, a 10-year veteran of the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization in the region.
There is less financial capacity, and moreover, there are huge political problems. Political problems that can only be solved locally. But that's sure that the international community should push the government to find a solution and to implement peace as soon as possible.
There's no sign of that, though, not even a hint of light at the end of the tunnel. Just a country full of bridges to nowhere, like this one outside a wheel, still unfinished. Aid agencies are now the only things standing between life and death for many South Sudanese.
Our IPD for the children who are malnourished.
David Kermania manages one of the few primary health clinics in the Northwest for Première Urgence Internationale, filling a gap left by state clinics closed down for lack of funds. The numbers of worried mothers traveling overland to reach it, always dressed in their best, is climbing, he says, along with the number of children suffering from malnutrition. South Sudan, he says, will need help for a long time to come.
It's still in the infancy stages of development and the formation of institutions, establishing of services, basic services, and therefore humanitarian support and development, early recovery and development support is greatly needed.
Convincing donors to keep faith in the country's ability to right itself eventually will get harder the longer the bloodletting continues, the horizon blurred. And disillusionment amongst the South Sudanese themselves will continue to spread, fraying whatever bonds existed between them and their young country. Faith still lives in the churches, but they are also full of hardship and loss. Even the reverend preaching forgiveness admits that those who can are abandoning ship, abandoning hope, like a star that's fallen off a flag.
Some have run away because of famine. Some have run away because of they don't see future of South Sudan.
And so the refrain, how long is long enough before you stop believing? Before you undo what you have done and rewind the birth of a nation. Margaret Evans, CBC News, South Sudan.